And I didn't show anything specifically that's not on the slides, so you guys have these slides available. So if you go back to the recording, you'll be able to just kind of follow it. But thanks, Archana. All right. Then this next step, a BP includes tasks that are needed to complete in order of a business event to occur. We kind of went through that. You have those security groups that you can define at every single step. And then you could also have notifications, right, on when, saying like, and we'll walk through that in a bit as well. You could say when the event is kicked off, when a specific status is triggered, when a specific step is completed, or when the whole BP is completed, and we'll walk through that as well. And then here's just a couple of examples of different BPs. So just like I was saying, like when you go ahead, create a position, there's this BP that's associated with position. So all of these, or when you're terminating an employee, when you're hiring an employee, all of these tasks are in Workday, and then they are associated with specific business processes that are configurable. And then around compensation, most of the time you're going to hang around the hire, the create position one, the terminating one, change job. And so this is just kind of showing you all the different BPs. So benefits kind of huge right now, right? Like a lot of people are going through open enrollment, and time off is another one. And then this other one, right? Personal data is a big one. So let's see what this is here. We kind of, this is just, you go ahead, initiate the hire. It's kind of what I was talking about earlier. And then you have the proposed compensation, which is a different BP. So we just pull that into here and make it a sub-business process review compensation. And then it goes back to, once that sub-business process is complete, it continues doing everything that it does in the hire. So it's all about what the functional need is for the business. So Workday will give you default definitions. You can go ahead and use it, customize it, copy them, create your own. So every organization possibly could have a different a business process, like for the hire for that specific type. So it's all configurable. And so here it's all talking about default versus org specific. So let's say in this GMS tenant, Global Modern Services, you have a default definition that is delivered, and it's all the same. So kind of just using the same example that I did, right, for ZaranTech. At the highest level, all of these are following this hire for GMS, but we see that the legal team just has their own approvals that they'd like, excuse me, maybe they have more approvals, more to-dos, or more services that get kicked off. And so they have something very specific, right? And then let's say you have two big orgs, hierarchies and stuff. So for whatever reason, there's also this Acme Corp in your tenant. You can have that one just use the default definition. And what happens is if you don't, let's say, I went in, created this Acme Corp after the fact, and I didn't associate it to any BP, it's always going to pick the default definitions as the BP. So if you don't dictate or manually assign or link these BPs to your org structure, it's just going to always go and find whatever the default definition is that's tied to the task and kick that off until you manually kind of override it. Okay, so this is walking us through like, how do you go ahead and tie those BPs to the organization. And I think I showed it last time, but we'll walk through it again. So what you can do is you can override the default definition by either copying and then configuring the copy on a particular supervisory or organization. So you can go to the org, do related actions, specifically look for business process copy, and link is copy existing definition or link existing definition. Don't know if it goes into that over here, but copy, just to kind of emphasize this piece, copy is basically saying you want that ditto kind of, so let's say you have 5 steps on your hire business process. I'm copying it, I'm linking it to this other supervisory org, but they're kind of independent. So if I make any changes on this copy, it's not going to affect the existing higher BP from where I copied, right? So it's basically creating 2 independent higher BPs because all you're doing is copying. But if you're linking, so let's say over here, I wanted to link, I went related actions on the supervisory org, and I said I wanted to copy and link the business process definition, and I chose link. Then it's going to take this hire for GMS. And if I make any changes to the one that's linked here, it's basically going to affect this. So it's just then just one. All you're doing is linking. They're dependent on each other. So if I make any changes to this business process, it's going to affect the supervisory org. It's going to be effective for this as well. So that's the difference. Generally, like it just depends again on the need. But if I'm planning things to be different, and it's just, I just need a starting point, because, let's say again for this example, I know that I want, so for this example, I know that I need just additional steps, but I want to follow all the other steps that are part of or hire for GMS. There's just, small nuances that I need to change. Then I'll just go ahead and do copy and then add the additional steps. But in this scenario, let's say I wanted for this supervisory org to just follow the same thing as the one for GMS, because it's basically the same steps the same workflow that I wanted to follow. Then I would just possibly do link. And, if I need to make any changes, I just want it to be consistent throughout the tenant, irrelevant of the different orgs. So I hope that was clear about copy and link. All right, so we talked about default business processes that are kind of delivered by Workday. Those, it's just kind of the recommended approach, and it's easier to maintain. Like if you just have one default business process that, every org can kind of follow. But the downside of having that, right, like is, then you'll have complex condition rules. So just like what we're talking about with the ZaranTech stuff, let's say the finance and administration stuff, they really have like all these nuances. Let's say, if it's a lawyer, then it needs to follow a specific approval step maybe, or they need, or whatever it is, and the financial planners, there's a different thing. So it makes sense to just kind of split off their BP and add condition rules maybe, or other items here, rather than constantly just adding all of those additional steps for everyone else and just making it more complex when you're trying to troubleshoot. So that's why these organization-specific business processes, just make for a cleaner, easier way to kind of analyze. It makes it, easier to figure out where you are kind of in the business process, better performance, especially around like if you have really complex rule, right? Like around these condition rules, then it just makes it easier if it's very specific to that specific org. But then the downside is the maintenance, right? Like if you constantly need to, let's say all of a sudden, around COVID, there's like all these checklists that new hires need to do. Now you need to make sure that every hire BP that you have in your company, has this specific step. So, and then you're also having to, like, any updates that you make, you're usually testing them before you go ahead and update that in production. So again, all of this is driven by the functional needs of the business though, right? If you're a smaller company and you have just very set business, kind of everybody's following the same workflow, it makes sense to just have that one BP. But somebody like Amazon or the Walmarts, they probably have very organization-specific BPs, and probably a lot of people helping to maintain and test them. So here is where we get to talk about the related actions piece. So you go to any specific business process. So over here, let's say they went to like, which one is this one? Business process type is customer invoice email event, and they're doing it for a specific org, and all they're saying is go ahead and copy the definition that's associated, the current business process BP, and associate it with global modern services. So it's just taking whatever the default definition is for this one and copying it to this. And then once I go to that BP, I'll be able to go ahead and update the steps according to whatever I want to customize it to. So again, copy is making two independent versions of it. It's the same, actually, it's the same BP in the sense that it has the same steps, but two independent versions in the system. So there'll be one that's called customer invoice email event default definition, and then the next one will be customer invoice email event for global modern services. So once you associate a BP to an org, it'll always have the name, and we'll talk through that in a little bit. But linking is just, you're not making an additional copy of it. You're just basically saying, take that default definition or wherever you're taking that related action off of, and just this one is going to follow the same thing. If I'm updating it on this supervisory org, it's going to affect the other one that BP is related to. Okay, I think this is just stating the same thing that we've been talking about, right? Like, it's just a bunch of steps, tasks that make up the BP, and you get to dictate who is responsible for completing each one of the steps. So you can have multiple security groups and just one person needs to do it. You can configure it that every person part of that security group needs to do it. So a lot of configuration, and the more and more you play with it, the more you work at a customer site, you'll see you get that sandbox access and you could configure it and play around with it. So business process and security. So just like we had the domain security policy, you have these business process security policy, and you get to dictate which security groups are going to start the business process, the specific actions on the BP. So who's going to do the approval, which, let's say if you have an integration kicking off, who's going to kick off the integration, and then who's going to perform actions on the entire business process. You can dictate that. Who's going to approve it, correct, cancel, rescind, and reassign tasks. So all of that, I'll kind of show you that in a little bit. And just like domain security policy, where you have to, any updates you made, you have to activate those changes. The same thing here is once you go ahead and add any security groups on the business process security policy, you're going to go ahead and activate that as well. Okay, and then you get to dictate the order of these steps. And we kind of talked about it last time, is the way you do it, and it's recommended in Workday, right, is you use alpha letters rather than numerics. You can use numerics, but let's say you specify 1 to 10. before you even get to the second step, it's going to trigger the 10th step. It just kind of uses it that way. But if you need to add, and let's see, did they go into detail here? They didn't. Give me 1 second. I put it in my Jamboard about this. Okay, so this order of execution is, all this stuff is kind of listed in that slide where you can have the order of the business process steps. You can have even the order of the rules in a condition, and we'll go through that. You can have order of to-dos in a checklist and the order in which step help is processed. So you get to configure basically all this is saying is like the order of which items occur within a business process. So it's you can have excuse me, one or more alphanumeric characters. So just like I was saying, 10 sorts before 2. So that's why that's not recommended. It's just using lowercase letters. You'll see that when you're looking at the default definition. So what's kind of delivered by Workday is always kind of like A, B, C, D. And you can always do A1, A2, A3. And so where that becomes helpful is, let's say, you already had like steps A, B, C, D, and E. And then you realize, you know what, I really need a step between B and C. So you could do BA, you could do B1, however you'd like to do it. So the reason that it's helpful to start with these lowercase letters is because then it makes it easy to go ahead and add steps in between if later on you decide that there's a functional need that there needs to be a step in between. And then Ramesh, to answer your question about that parallel step, right? You just need to make sure that, let's say I decide that step C, that there needs to be like 2 or 3 things kind of running in parallel. I'll just go ahead and define it as those 3 things that need to be in parallel, as all 3 rows will have the order of C in it. And I'll show you that in a bit as well. And going back to the initiation step, every BP will have an initiation step, and all of them will have a lowercase a. And then you get to use anything from B through Z. You can it'll go ahead, it won't stop you from using uppercases or any numbers or special characters. It'll just go ahead that you need to make sure that the initiation step must be the only first step. So it'll just give you a warning for that one. And then about the parallel stuff. So let's say I have the 3 and I have all 3 of them. The order is C, C, and C. It's going to all kind of be fired off, and they all need to be completed before it moves on to step D. So by configuring it that way, you are saying that the business process shouldn't proceed forward until all 3 are kind of completed. And then you could, of course, skip letters. That's totally fine. So over here, they skipped E, but it just is going to continue following. Like, it's going to make sure A is completed before B, then C is completed before D, and then F is completed. D is completed before F. And just like what I was saying is, like, let's say, it comes back and you realize that, you really need more steps in generally the way folks go ahead and do it. We do CA, CB, CC, you could do CAA if you realize that you need another step between CA and CB. So it just makes it a little bit easier to kind of, without removing rows and like redoing a lot of stuff, or finding the specific area where you need this step kind of inserted in. This is the way that you go ahead and update a BP. The way you kind of do that is on the step. So let's say, let's take, for example, propose compensation, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
um, if we say that the compensation is more than 250, right? Then take
Yeah.
this specific step, right? That's where
Mm-hmm.
you could create that rule that, hey, the salary, it has to be above 250. Then you're going to look for a specific approval, or you're going to do something specific in this step. Otherwise, like let's say you're hiring just a normal employee, it's not part of the executive stuff, it doesn't meet that condition, it's going to automatically go to the next step. So that's the way. And I think when I go into the tenant and we kind of use location as an example, you'll kind of see that you'll be able to accomplish what you're saying, and it's going to be through condition rule. You won't be able to say, like you don't get to specifically say, like, go to step D. It's really about, does the information meet the criteria to meet that condition rule? Then it's going to specifically do something in that step. But I think you'll get to see it in a bit. But you won't be able to say, oh, go to step C, go to step D. That's not how it works. So in that case, it's like, then you'd have to create your rule to say, okay, if it's between 250 and 300, this is what I want you to do. If it's between 300 and 350, this is what I want you to do, right? So it's going to go down the list and see what criteria it meets. And then according to that, it's going to kick off that specific step that the condition is on. You'd like, but you have to remember performance, right? Like, because then it has to kind of go through all this condition rules. Let's say you have that, or you just have so much complexity in it that when you run into an issue, then it's going to be hard for you to troubleshoot it. Generally, I haven't seen too crazy, like more than let's say 20 steps, but most of them are kind of like the completion step is set up above, and everything else is kind of to-dos or nice to have sort of things. But yeah, Workday doesn't limit you in terms of how many steps you'd like to configure on a BP. All right, so I think I am gonna come back to this stuff, and then let me just see what's here. Okay, I am gonna go into the tenant and then possibly just as a review come back to this. There was one more thing. So I will upload this to the LMS, but this is kind of the same, stuff that we've kind of been talking about BPs, and then these are all the different kind of actions that you can take on. I know last time I was kind of walking you through a couple of these, but for the recording purposes, I am just going to kind of share this screen. It's good, it's helpful to kind of see this, so that you can go ahead, fix these business processes, restart something like if there's errors, put a business process on hold. Um, you can reassign steps. We kind of saw that you could go ahead and reassign specific steps. Let's say if you know the person is out on vacation, or it doesn't make sense for them to specifically do it, or they're kind of swamped, you could do that. You can review a specific step, just kind of like approving by saying that you're going to review it. You're saying you're going to either the action you're going to take on that specific step is you're going to approve. So let's say compensation. Um, I'm either going to approve whatever the proposed compensation is, deny it, or go ahead and send it back. Or if I want to specifically revise it, you could skip it. You have the to-dos on the business process. Again, like the approve here, you could cancel a business process. You could close specifically a business process after a specific action has been taken. You could correct it. We were talking about reassign steps. And now I want to show a couple of reports that are useful in the tenant. So let's go here. Okay, so there's two reports that kind of are helpful around like these business processes. So let me do new share again so you could see the tenant. So the first one, business process types with default definition. Okay, so this is what it's showing you is all the default business processes that are in use, right? So if I do the higher one, all right, it's saying it was mostly recently used here, and we can go to the default definition. And luckily in this tenant, there's only one initiation step. But generally, you know, when Workday, you get a fresh new tenant, a new build, you'll see, you know, multiple steps in here that you can go ahead and configure. And then the other one is, and there's only one. So you get the description, you get, like I've been kind of emphasizing, there's so many different ways of seeing information in Workday. Some of it is more intuitive than others, but then this is just providing a different view of like the approval actions that you can take on the higher BP. Can you advance it, rescind it? Can you cancel it? Can you? So it's just showing it again in a different view. You can see it a different way as well. And then, you know, what are all the different tasks you can do? What are the options on save? What are the business processes that you can, sub-business processes you can go ahead, so it just provides another view. If you just went to the higher BP itself, you could kind of see the same information. So let's go to one that's not the higher default definition, but let's see, maybe somebody has done something more interesting. So something that I was saying, right? You always have the default definition, and once you go ahead and assign it to a specific supervisory org, then you get the name of that supervisory org. So let's see what finance. All right, so here's a more complicated one. So the parallel step thing that you were asking about, Ramesh, here is one, right? So we're basically saying after D, once you propose the compensation hire and this step is complete because it's not set to optional, basically go ahead and take these two steps at the same time. So request dot grant for new hire, request one-time payment. So both of these are going to be kicked off at the same time, and both are going to go to the HR partner. But you see over here, because of configurations, we set this to optional. So it's going to move forward to F. But if this was set to no, these two, even though they were kind of done at the same time, they'd have to be completed before step F gets kicked off. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, let me know. So that's that. And then over here, let's go ahead and go to the business process policy. So just like we were talking about, right? Domains. This is the policy for the business process. Okay, so over here you see multiple kind of initiating steps, and it's specifically for you know, what type of hire you're doing. So maybe you're in this scenario converting a contingent worker to employee. You want certain security groups to go ahead and access this. For hire employee, you want certain security groups to be able to initiate the hire. So that's what you're doing over here is based on specific scenarios, hiring an employee directly from their employment agreement. There's specific folks that can kick off the BP, so specific security groups. And hire is of course very complicated, and in terms of there could be multiple different scenarios. So that's why you have multiple initiating actions. Generally, you might not have as many of these different scenarios, but Workday is allowing you to say, based on these specific scenarios, these are the people that can kick off the BP, right? And so if you're not part of this, you won't have be able to kick off that hire employee as the initiation step. Then, of course, you have multiple kind of actions or in the steps that you can do. So the person that needs to review the employee hire, these are the security groups, the people, the users in the security groups that will have access to this. And if you go ahead and so, on these different areas, if you have a specific security group listed, right, then that's how you're going to be able to pull from the group. So if I'm saying access to, let's say, let's see, 1 second. I'm trying to see not a business process. Let me do it the other way around. Completed, approve, cancel. Review, employee hire. I don't think these are in there, but basically it's if I had any of these steps in there, then I get to be able to select the security groups that are configured here. If, let's say, I remove somebody because I don't want them to have access anymore, or I'm adding a specific security group, then really important, just make sure once you make those changes, they're only effective once you activate pending security policy changes. So this is basically saying who will have access to these type of steps. So if you want somebody to be able to approve specific steps in the BP, they need to be listed here.
No, is this someone which will system will create or we have to create?
You have to go ahead. So just like domain security policy, right? Like you have to go in, add the specific security groups in there. You have to do the same thing here. You have to make sure that this is enabled and go ahead and add the security groups in there. So this, I forget which release this was part of, but I think I showed you earlier. Somebody was asking one time, and I forgot to look into it. Like, can you go ahead and print this? Like, sometimes for the more complicated stuff, it makes sense to be able to print it. I don't think that you are able to print this. What I've done in the past is kind of take screenshots and then kind of print it, which is kind of a little annoying, but it still gets you the information that you're looking for. But when you have something really complicated, right? Like Ramesh, you were saying, like, does Workday kind of limit you in terms of how many steps you can have on a BP? You're not. And when it becomes kind of a little interesting, especially when you add the condition rules and you add all these parallel steps and stuff, it's really important to kind of see a visual view, right? Before this was kind of delivered, people were kind of doing their own mock-ups of it. A lot of people were sending support cases in terms of, I'm configuring it a certain way, but it doesn't seem to be following it. But now you're exactly seeing, even if, you might be thinking like you've configured something in a certain way, and when you're testing it, it looks a little bit different, this is the best thing to kind of help troubleshoot am I really doing, have I really updated the BP according to what I need, right? So you're getting to see based on specific security groups, like how this all, um, the kind of flow of it. So if I come out, I have specific tasks for each specific user and it's following this flow. So let's just walk through it. So initiation step, and then here's that conditional, right? Logic, hire not from recruiting. If it's yes, that this hire, I guess, is not from recruiting, start a background check. If it's the hire not from recruiting, I guess it's the double negative. Um, if it's that, I guess it is from recruiting, then it follows, it just skips over this, and then it goes county with collective agreements. If this has country with collective agreements, like the person has associated with this hire, the country has collective agreements, then it's going to follow this, business process. So here's that sub business process that it's going to follow. If there's no collective agreements, it's going to skip over this part and then go to proposed compensation for hire. So you'll see multiple ifs, but if there's nothing underneath it, it's not a condition rule. So it'll just automatically go into this next process, this next step, and do compensation. Once it's done with compensation, it will move on. Let me see if I could just move it this way. And here's your parallel step, right? It's going to do the request stock grant for hire, request one-time payment, and the group that's taking care of this is the HR partner. And then after this is complete, or it's going to actually, since this is optional, it's not going to wait for it's completed. It's going to move on to the next thing. And here's more conditional logic. Country with works council staffing approval. So if it's yes, then it's going to go through this approval process. If it's no, then it's going to move on to the next step. So Ramesh, does that kind of help answer that question that you were saying? Like, if not C, then go to D. It's these conditional rules that will go ahead and say, if it's yes, then it needs to follow something else. Otherwise, it skips over to the next step. So you don't get to say like step A, step B, step C, but it's through the conditional logic. And maybe if I walk into one, that will help. Okay, so here's your conditional rule, right? And it's saying it's going to get triggered from step B, which is this right here. And here's the name, hire not from recruiting. And basically the rule that I have is job application business process created from. So where was, and you could just go ahead, click on this related action, and then you'll get more information. The job application event associated with the initiated staffing event business process. So where was this kind of application created from or initiated from? So this is a Workday delivered field. Right here, it says Workday delivered. You're only going to get one instance of this, and it's associated with the job applicant event. And what it's saying is, as long as it's not empty, then go ahead and this is probably a bad example. I don't think they configured it appropriately. Let's go to maybe this one. Okay, so this one is country with Works Council staffing approval. So country of location for this specific individual. So this is also probably Workday delivered. The country of the location for the worker prior to this business process is any in the selection list. So it's Germany. So if this person meets this criteria that they're, before this business process kicked off, that their location was Germany, or that their proposed location is Germany, then they need to go ahead and go through this step. So assign collective agreement. So the HR partner will go ahead and see this, and then they're going to have to assign whatever this collective agreement is. But if they're not part of the worker that you're hiring, or the pre-hire doesn't have a location of Germany, it's just going to go ahead and skip over this step and move on to the next step. Does that help answer condition rules? And how if you meet a certain criteria, and you could make the condition rules as complicated as you want. So proposed compensation is given by Workday.
Okay. So
Yeah.
how do we know that these kind of conditions are there? Like, what are the list of?
So proposed compensation is a sub-business process, right? So you'll know the different actions by let's see, I think it's this. So these are like all the stuff that you can have as actions on this higher BP. So this is delivered by Workday, this part. But in terms of the conditions, if just to make sure that I'm answering your questions, in terms of when you go to these condition rules and these fields, these are also delivered by Workday. And I think I know what you're trying to ask is, like, how do you know like which specific field you need to pull in, right? There's hundreds, thousands of these, and it's going to be kind of initially, I feel like for me, it was just kind of, it took some time learning like which specific field I'm looking for. And then, right now, if you were to search for location, so many, multiple of these come up. And then it's reading what's in here, like to understand the description and where it's kind of, what it's kind of tied to, the related business object, to be able to search for it. And then the relational operator is delivered by Workday. The comparison type is delivered by Workday. The comparison value, this is where you can add your own flavor and your own terminology in here. And then the name of the condition rule, you get to put, the description you get to put, and the comment as well. Oh, then this completion step, right? So over here, and this is kind of good to know, like these could be questions on an interview, is, let's say I have in here, I have 26 items, right? That doesn't mean that they're all 26 steps, because some of them are parallel, some of them might not be triggered because of the condition rules, right? Like the criteria, the specific scenario doesn't meet the criteria of the condition rule. But you have this set to yes. So after all step F is completed, we're saying that the business process is complete. So that green check mark when I'm hiring somebody or I was changing anything, it's basically letting me know that the event is complete, and now I'll be able to see my changes. But that doesn't mean that there's not additional stuff that kind of needs that is taking place. So over here, let's say I'm hiring Logan McNeil into Global Modern Services. She goes through all of this, and at this point, the business process is complete, but there's more stuff that needs to be done. So before this step, if I search for her, I shouldn't be able to find her because the hire event isn't complete yet for her. But at this point, I'm saying that the business process event should be complete. I should be able to see her, and then go ahead, create a Workday account. It'll still go ahead and follow all this stuff. But if I had not put yes over here, let's say I hadn't put any step as yes, the default behavior is that until all the business process steps are completed, the step Z, then the hire will be, the person will be hired. So if I didn't have that yes set, but I had it set here, or I just don't have it set in the whole business process, the default behavior is that it's going to go ahead, wait until step Z is completed, and then I'd be able to search for Logan McNeil. And if I go just kind of finish that thought with that example, if I don't have that yes set anywhere for the complete on any of these steps, when I search for Logan McNeil, I'm not going to find her. So that's kind of an important thing to remember. And another important thing to remember, or maybe I should ask the question and see what your response is. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to see your response in the chat window. So somebody's going to have to come off of mute. Can you have two higher business processes for the same org? I'm sorry, I can't see chat. What are your guesses?
Yes,
You're saying yes, Ramesh?
yeah.
No. So that's really key. You can't have a higher business process, two higher business process for the same, um, and maybe the supervisory org. So for global modern services, you should only have one higher business process. You could have multiple business processes, right? Like for proposed compensation, for all this stuff that are tied to global modern services, but there's only one BP that, like when I'm hiring an employee, I can only follow one higher business process that is associated to that org. So over here, this is interesting. But just like what you're saying, I have all of these following the same higher BP, but I want this one to follow a different one. You could do that. When I'm saying supervisory org, I'm only talking about one supervisory org. So the executive management, um, marketing department, each one of these is only following one higher BP. Does that make sense? It's not that this has two higher BPs associated with it. That's what I was asking. But yes, yeah. So it's really important to make sure that question, when it comes up, is like a whole org structure can have different versions of the BP, higher BP assigned to it, but every supervisory org only has one business process type of hire, one business process type of termination, right? Because when I'm terminating an employee, I need to know what workflow I need to follow. So there can only be one workflow of that specific type.
So that means like highest level of supervisor to the lowest one in the org chart should follow the same hire process.
No, so maybe I confused things. One second. Let me go back to this. So over here, sorry. So you can have, right? Like, just like we were saying, a different BP, higher BP for this subordinate org over here. And then all the other ones are following their specific, the general higher BP, right? But what I'm saying is, like, specifically for this executive management, how many higher BPs can I have just for this? It's only one. Yes, only one. So for a whole org structure, you can have multiple, let's say, higher BPs, like different flavors. So over here, I have two, right? For this whole ZaranTech, that there's two different ones, but ZaranTech, like if I'm talking about just this org, this is only following one BP. This one is following its own version of the BP, but like each one of these departments or these organizations only have one higher BP. So in the tenant, I can have, as you can even see here, right? In the tenant, oh, I'm not sure my screen again. I have all of these. There's like 92 that are being returned. Give me 1 second. Let me find out the exact number. There's 92, but for the CEO group, there's only this one higher BP, right? For Amar Group, there's for that org, there's only one higher VP. So that's the question, and it's really important to make sure that you understand that piece. All right, let me go back. I forgot. Okay, let me see if there's anything else that I want to point out before we kind of go into lab work that'll.
So what you mean to say is ZaranTech, we can have one BP and executive management and all should have one BP like that, right?
Yes, exactly. For that specific business process type. And just to remind you again, the business process type, hire is a business process type, termination is a business process type, proposed compensation is a business process type. So of that type, only one per org.
So one more question here.
Yeah.
Process. Suppose if you said like a proposed compensation and then we have something else, another step. So how do the system knows whether the proposed compensation is successful or
So let's say proposed compensation for hire, right? And here is she needs to go ahead and propose it and kind of review it and then submit it. So until she submits it, it's not going to move on. As long as it's configured that way, it's not going to move on to the next step, right? If she denies it, it's going to deny it and send it back to the previous step. So that's how it knows. It's inbox items to whichever security group or user it's waiting on. Does that help? Okay. Let me now go here. Okay. Okay. So notifications, we'll kind of get into this, but there's certain notifications that are, kind of just delivered by Workday, and you can disable or enable them. So over here, we're saying that at initiation, we didn't specify a group. So when this is kicked off, it's not specifically going to anyone, but let's say the to-do over here, add worker UK tax details. And let's go into this. We're basically saying send this to an inbox, an email notification to do, add worker to UK tax details. This is what it looks like. And it's going to send it to this security group. So anybody that's part of this security group is going to get notified. But I will walk you through an example of notifications and kind of setting this up. Let me just make sure I haven't missed anything. Okay. And then kind of going to what we were talking about, condition rules and, this versioning of BPs and how you can only have one. So when you there's different ways of accomplishing the same thing that you want, right? Like it all depends on what the customer is comfortable with and how complicated your BP is getting. But let's say that you are hiring employees in both China and US. You could have a higher BP and just set the condition step for that hire, like something similar to this country stuff that they have here, like is country location, China, or is country location US, right? And you could have, a number of things that you want specifically. Like if they're from China, maybe you need certain verification. If they're not, if they're just US, maybe you're doing stock grant for them, right? The condition rules can be that way, and it could all be part of just one higher BP. But maybe it's that you just want two different orgs, one specifically for a location of China, and then the other one for US. So you have two orgs, right, in your structure, one for US, one for China, and each of them have their own BPs. Now you don't need that condition logic, right, to really check for location. You just have your own BPs and you'll just configure it the way you want to uh, in the BP itself. So you could accomplish the same thing. It just depends on the way you configure items. Okay, let's go ahead and go through some lab stuff. Let me change. So I went ahead and created the org structure in this tenant. So I should see this. It's so funny every time I have to create, but I can't piggyback off of previous stuff. So, it might not be fully fleshed out, all this stuff, but we'll see how far I can get with it. So in here right now, ZaranTech, let's look at the org structure. So it's very similar to kind of how I was showing, except there's no people and there's no kind of multiple subordinates. It just kind of goes down to this level. So you have the senior level, then you have the executive management department, and then here's like human resources and all that stuff. And I haven't, created people in here. I haven't. So the role stuff is going to be kind of interesting. So I'll kind of go back and forth between global modern services that I think has a lot of changes right now and what I'm doing here. But what I want to do is like what we've been talking about, right? Associate a business process. Right now, if I were to hire somebody into the supervisory org, because I haven't really associated anything manually, it's going to always default to the default definition. So in this case, the default definition is just an initiation step. So if I haven't gone ahead again, configured something manually and tied it to my new supervisory org over here, it's just going to go ahead and go to this, and whatever is configured on this default definition is going to start kicking off. Luckily, there's nothing here. But now, just to kind of walk you through this exercise, I want to create, copy, or link. So I'm saying I want this hire, and I want to copy from existing definition. If I do none of the above, it's going to look very similar to this. It's just going to have an initiation thing. But just, for the sake of doing this, I am going to do this. And now I can choose from anybody, right? Like, let's say I really like the one for global modern services that had all those crazy steps in it. Great, I could choose that. I am just going to do default definition because I just want that. So I could have done this, or I could have done none of the above. And link existing is just, again, like, let's say I really liked the one for global modern services, and I feel like my org should be following that same BP. And if any changes happen there, I want it to be effective in my org as well, then this is where I do link. But I am going to just do the default definition again. And going back to the business process type, right? Like, let's say I didn't need to do it for hire, but I really wanted propose compensation, um, or I need to do it for termination. So this is where you get to define which business process you're looking for, the type, but let's stick to hire. And business object over here, right? Like which org am I doing this for? You have the effective date, time zone, and we could get into that in a little bit. And so I'm going to click OK. Once I do that, here it is, right? Like I have my initiation step, I have my notifications here, and this is kind of uh, just, do I want to enable? These are custom notifications, I guess, that came over. And all this other information should be the same. So let's go ahead, start adding steps to this. And what I want to add is I do a, or let me take that out. Let's do B. Now I want to do that proposed compensation. So action. And I am not going to check this as optional. Again, what I was mentioning is optional is basically like you can move on to the next step. Nothing's stopping you. Like you're not waiting for an approval. You're not waiting for anybody to really review it. And so the group, this is the security group. Let's see if it lets me do it. All right, HR partner and due date. Due date doesn't really mean anything. It's just the reminders that you're gonna be able to keep getting in the inbox or the notifications to let you know that you didn't finish something. And again, let's do action. And at this point, I want to do edit Workday account. Great. And then I'm saying this is going to be the security partner. And all of these, right, are tied to the roles of, which I don't have defined right now. And so it's going to ask me like, every time it's going to hit a step right now, it's going to be like, this isn't really assigned to anybody because I didn't, when the page loads, because the roles aren't defined here, except for Logan McNeil, since like it has to have a default, but I haven't put HR partner, I haven't put manager, but that's what it is. Like that person in this role would need to be part of, let's say, Logan McNeil needs to be part of the HR partner, and she needs to be like listed here as HR partner and assigned to. Then let's go ahead. B. And small thing to point out, even though I was kind of doing it in descending order, it went ahead and changed it. So I want to, let's say, so there's a couple of things that I want to kind of point out now, right? So I went ahead, because I copied it, it moved all those initiating security groups. It took the same VP security policy that was on the higher VP, the default definition. And then, because that's all set up, I got to select specific groups over here. Now, if I wanted to set this as the completion step, this is how I do it. So there's an important thing to kind of point out here. When I'm in that edit definition view, So this is where you get to do that. And you get to say when this is effective for. So right now, I just want to kind of show you this. Are you guys seeing the tenant? I want to make sure that I'm sharing the right one.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. You'll see that over here is where you can add the steps. But if it's anything specific to the step, right? So over here, I can't do the options that I'll show you in a little bit. So set a specific step to completion, right? Like it's here, but I can't check it for whatever reason. And the conditional stuff, I can't add it here. The what is it? Label overrides, I can't do. So if it's something specific to a step outside of just configuring the steps part of the BP, you need to make sure you go ahead and get out of this edit view and come back to this, just the view. So you can't add any additional steps, but now what you can do on the step itself is these items here. So I can set something to complete. So let's go ahead and set this one to complete. I'm basically saying like, and conditional logic is already kind of built into these. So if this applicant already has a Workday account, just make sure you're able to like edit it. The security partner may need to have to edit it. Otherwise, if they don't have a Workday account, go ahead and set this one, right? And another thing, I guess, before I forget, let me just write this down so I remember to say it. And this can continue going on, this onboarding piece, but as soon as it hits this step, I'm basically saying, go ahead and hire whoever this business process was kicked off for, right? And the event is complete, and I'll be able to search for this person in the system. But if I hadn't put this, basically, until onboarding was complete, I wouldn't be able to, which I think is a sub-business process. No, it's not. But it would be that until this is complete, I wouldn't be able to see whoever I'm hiring. Now let's go ahead and do let's add an additional step in here. And I'll show you in a bit what I'm doing. Okay. So right now that they're parallel steps, Workday isn't going to stop you that, it's exactly the same thing. It might be in here. Step D, let's create this for step D. That's fine. But what I want is for this one to be for something else. So I'm going to do a label override. I'll call this remuneration. And I'm saying, instead of calling it that, I'm going to call it this, or whatever you want, right? All right. And I want to put a conditional on this one. So, oh, where did it go? So I should have, and you see here, like this is showing me all those business processes that are assigned to this business object, ZaranTech, and all of them are default definition. Why? Because I didn't go ahead and update anyone except for the higher one. That was the only one. So I should see that one look. I hope it saves it wrong way. There we go. All right. So we have this. We're calling this one this over here, and let's go ahead and create conditional for this. So over here, we're going to go ahead. It's basically we need to go ahead and create a conditional rule. And what I want to say is, if somebody's being hired in Sarah, that it needs to, go through a different condition. So let's go ahead. Do the table and sorry. And you could choose, you saw, right, like how many were coming up. And I'm just saying the new location hierarchy for the worker as of the effective date. But you saw that there's many different, current, there's just location hierarchy. So you could just figure out which one you want. I want any in this section list. I feel like there's a little bit of a delay. And then I am saying basically, okay, yeah, it might not be. Okay, great. I'll just choose that. All right, and I'm going to click OK. All right, and then basically, so if it's part of UK, go ahead and do this specific step. Otherwise, I can, leave this as is, or I could say specifically, go ahead and create another condition rule, or actually, let's go back. Wanted to show you how you can copy an existing one. So let's do this. Okay. Here we go. Oh, this is what I was looking for. You could go ahead and copy like an existing one. Let's say you put a lot of logic in place, and instead of typing it all up, you can just do copy condition from rule. So if I want the other one that I was having, let me see if it'll come up. Okay, so there I go. I am going to take this out, and then I am just going to have this as outside of the UK. So maybe I just want this to be United States. And I actually, and I want this to be removed and actually be the proposed compensation, that one to be the completion step. So condition rule, depending on which one, even though they kind of look the same, but the only thing is like in the inbox, they'll end up seeing this rather than this. But setting up condition rules, pretty straightforward, right? You can make it as complicated as you want. And I am going to go ahead and set this one to complete. And you see, I only did one, but because these are kind of not parallel steps, but kind of are, right? Like it's either this one or this one that's going to get triggered, even though I set only one as a completion step, it set both. So depending on which one it fires off, it knows that it's going to go ahead and both of these are going to be the completion step for this BP. Any question? So I just walked you through condition rules, right? Like you can make them as complicated as you want. You can copy them over from something else and just change a small piece of it. And then once you set it to a specific step, now you have that specific criteria that which one is going to fire. And you could have different even security groups, right? Like if it's US, maybe it's some like HR partner that's specific to the US, HR partner that's specific to the UK. Your security groups are possibly set up that way. So a lot of configuration. Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, let me see what else is on before I get to the notification sections. Let's see what else. Is on the slides. I could just walk through this after. Okay, let me see if this works. And I think, and I may have gone over it, but let's see if I could get to this. So I think very early on, somebody had asked me a question. I believe it was both you, Ramesh and Shriram, that were asking like, how do I know if something is kind of stuck in a BP? So there's always that, you could go to the specific hire and look at, and let's just look at Logan, maybe. That would be a good place to start. Depending on like if you have visibility and these things are turned on, you can look at the job history. Let's see if it's turned on. Yeah, job history and then worker history as well. Let's see if it's worker history. You can see like where like different business processes that were kicked off and kind of where they are, or you can use did I have it here? Find events, right? And over here, it's asking you for the business process name. Let's do hire. And you know that, you've probably kicked off a hire, and you can go ahead and do a search, like say who it's for, by worker, initiates the person that went ahead and initiated the business process, the specific worker it's for, the status. So there's a lot of different ways that you could do it, but then you'll get to see where that process is, right? Like all these steps were completed. You could see by who, more details, right, about the person that you hired. So this is good, like if you're trying to figure out like, hey, I don't see the specific person, right? And you want to figure out where they are before they actually become, an employee. You could use this find events report to get you that information. All right, let me switch. I think where I stopped on the deck was around here. You've probably seen me do this. This is the kind of shorthand for the business process. So if you're searching for a specific business process and you don't want to, type in the full name, or you don't know the full name of even the business process, you could always put BP colon. And just again, another thing that I know I probably emphasized a couple of times, but if you're looking for specific prefixes and you want to know the shorthands for these prefixes, just put a question mark in the search. And we talked about business security policy, right? Like the domains we went over, they're specifically for tasks, reports, and everything like that. You need to make sure that you have access to the task, but then you need to make sure that you have access to the business process. So this report is also pretty useful when you want to know what specific business process you need to have access to or need to update. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Let's do. So functional area, let's do info. Okay, so you'll see that there's all these different business processes. So there's change emergency contact, change primary address, contact change. So all these different security, business process security policies for functional areas. And here are all the BPs There was another one that I wanted to show you. This one? No, I'm blanking on the name, but yes. So this is the one that I find useful, and then kind of going deeper, right? Like if you know, going back to the contact one, that you know you want to make sure that you have the domains updated, but then now you also want to see like what are all the business processes that are part of this contact information. Here's a great view, and if you want to drill into the specific business process, you can go ahead and do that here by doing view. So this one for me has been really useful, but there's those other ones that if you want to go to specific reports to get more granular stuff, but there's many ways to navigate, and we've kind of emphasized this, and this is kind of again, like it might come up in interview questions or conversations when you're talking to the interview panel, right? Like, how do you know a business process is complete, or how can you configure a business process to be completed? So you can either do related actions and just say that this step completes it, but there could be multiple steps after, and that's okay. So the example that they give here is a person can be listed as hired, even if the steps for that new employee, like their personal information, W4 form are not done. It's because that completion step was before all these other steps in the BP. And again, a good emphasis of if there's no completion step on the BP, the last step is considered that completion step. So until that last step is completed, then the BP will be considered complete. There's multiple ways of seeing this same information. You could just go to the BP and those other tabs, right? Like the services and the actions tab, or you can go to this business process configuration report and see all the different step types that are available. And it could be approvals, checklist, questionnaire, to-do, service, which kind of kicks off like other integrations or account creation or Workday delivered kind of processing. And this consolidated approval, I think I talked about it last time, but just in case, it's basically like, let's say you have like all those steps, like you have 20 steps on a BP and 5 steps in succession are for the HR partner, request stock compensation, stock grant, request compensation, like all these approvals are there. And instead of sending one inbox item for each one of those, it'll just go ahead, okay, the next 5 steps are all for the HR partner. Let me just send it all together as one inbox item, one kind of notification in their inbox. So they kind of just do everything instead of having 5 different inbox items in their inbox, right? And as soon as that chain breaks of, let's say, those 5 steps, and then I go ahead and I add one step in between somewhere there. After that 3rd step, it no longer is for HR partners, for security administrator or someone else. Then it's only going to send those 3 in the consolidated approval because I broke that chain. And then we saw about that the diagram is really helpful. The swim lanes, you get to see who specifically is assigned that specific step. Is there parallel steps going on? It's really nice to kind of see that workflow and understand it before you make any updates. And we talked about defined events. So it lets you kind of know the status of a specific hire, where something is, why was a hire canceled or rescinded. So you get to see all the information about the hire, and then also specifically drill into the steps of the BP and where it's kind of sitting or when it was completed. All right. So we went over the business process configuration options report, and then it's, again, all these reports are really useful. It just depends on, like, once you start using these different reports, which ones you feel more comfortable with. but it's all kind of showing the same type of data. This one shows you like the organization types which it's valid for, the allowable actions and approvals. It's just really, for me, I feel like it's super wordy. And it's really like the more complex the business process, the more rows, and it just becomes harder to consume the information. But again, it's whatever you're more comfortable with. But it lets you know a lot of the information that initially you might find very useful. All right. Okay, I think we kind of walked through this, but let's go ahead and just walk through another one if you guys don't mind. Let me move this over and let's take a different one. I think the one that I was looking at was higher, but let's see. Let's see a different one. Let me just make sure I'm sharing the screen. Yes. All right, let's do propose comp per hire. So you get your description here, sub-process only. So this is saying that this can only be part of another BP. So kind of just like how we're doing hire, this can only be a sub-process for that. You can have other sub-processes that are tied to this. So let's say if I went to the proposed compensation hire and I wanted other BPs to be kicked off, sub-process BPs, sorry, the other way around, that this can be part of these BPs. So add additional job, I can have proposed compensation, hire BP, sub-process part of these. So the same thing for hire that we saw, proposed compensation for hire, start international assignment, valid usages are for supervisory orgs. Does it have approval steps? Approvable, yes. Ad hoc approvable, yes. So, all the actions that we were talking about before. Anything else I want to call it? So these are the two tasks that are associated with this BP, change benefit elections for compensation change or review compensation for hire. And what initiates the sub process. So if you're having a life event, right, you want to change your benefits, this is what is going to go ahead and kick off that sub process. So just more details, and then that initial filtering is return business process for which the selected are allowed sub processes. So if I had selected this, right, because proposed compensation hire can be a sub process of another BP, this would be returned. But if I had this selected and it couldn't be a sub process, then this wouldn't come back with this. That's all that exercise was. Move my screen over so we could continue. We went through this, that's fine. We kind of walked through that. All right. And we talked through, right, editing business processes. Let's see if I missed anything here. We talked about how you can just go ahead and copy or just create a new one. And then if you're copying, you can always add, change, reorder, or delete specific steps, right? Nothing's stopping you. The deletion part, I don't know if I walked you guys through, but all that is that minus sign. We haven't set up notifications, but I'll go ahead and do that. And then we did the label override. All it is, if it's proposed compensation and you want it to be called something else, when that inbox item hits the person's inbox for that step, it'll just take that step label override as kind of the title. It will look like, so over here, right, proposed compensation higher, but I had this as remuneration. It will just take that as the label override and show it in the inbox that way. We talked through that. This is kind of just, I guess, more of a visual, right? Like around the configuration for a VP, you can have them default definition as delivered, and these steps and actions and tasks are all delivered by Workday, but you get to configure which action needs to be part of a specific step or the task, and then you get to define who is responsible for taking that action or that task, and it's fully configurable. And then as soon as a BP is kicked off, it's considered an instance or an event, right, for that hire. So for hiring Sarah, as soon as I trigger hire employee and it kicks off a BP, that becomes an event for hiring Sarah specifically. And then we talked about the edit and view mode when working with the business process configuration. Yeah, it's two modes. It's basically when you're editing the business process, that's where you're adding the steps and like who's responsible for it. In the view mode is when you go ahead, and I think the next slide might have it. Oh, here we go, perfect. The edit is where you're getting to add and remove steps. You get to put the order, you get to put who's responsible for the specific step, the due dates, you get to say if any of the steps are optional, and then if you need everyone that's part of that security group to do the step, right? You can, and I don't know if I showed that, but let me go back to one. So this one over here, when I go to edit, so this is the optional part. This is where, let's see. Oh, it's probably not. I know why it's not doing it, but when you have two, what is it called? Two security groups listed here, then you could say select all, and everyone needs to go ahead and the HR partner and the security, let's say administrator, or who else can I, let me try something. Okay. I don't know why it's not allowing me, but basically you can go ahead and select all there. And because right now, let's say you had two HR partners for whatever reason for this org, both people will get notified if that all checkbox isn't selected. And as long as one person takes action on it, the other person won't need to take an action and it'll get removed from their inbox. But if I had put all, then both of them need to get both would get the notification and it wouldn't move to the next step until both had approved or taken an action. So then next thing is the view. So we talked about the edit mode when you're doing the related action off the business process. But when you just go to the business process, you are defaulted into the view mode where you're not going to be able to do any of these things, but you'll be able to do specific actions on the steps, which is create the condition rules, add any step delays, add any skip steps for certain groups. You can change the label overrides. We'll go ahead and add notifications in a little bit and define when the process is complete. So here's how to edit the definition. I feel like you guys probably know how to do that. We talked about the parallel steps. So let's look at this example. And I think this is how it's kind of interesting that it works this way. So Workday displays the inbox step tasks in the opposite order. specified in the business process definition if you sort your inbox by newest on top. So let's say if a business process administrator has all these parallel steps, right? You have add a photo, complete form I-9, change emergency contacts. It basically takes because you have it set to this. Let me show you in the inbox. I have this set to newest on top. So the way that this would show is basically kind of like in reverse order. So it would consider change emergency contacts as the last because it's the newest one, and it would show this way. We talked about these. So to do is just a reminder. So action, you're actually taking some sort of kind of, right, like action approval. It's kind of going to hold up the next step as long as you don't have it set to optional. And basically, you're just allowing the user to edit the business process data. But to-dos are just reminders or activities. You know, they can be grouped into checklists or anything like that, but you don't need to actually do anything for it to kind of move to the next step. So you can have it associated with any security groups in the tenant. There's no restrictions. And yeah, the to-do is kind of just like, you know, need to go ahead and do like some sort of facility stuff. Make sure you assign a desk to them. Make sure that you get the badge, or the employee goes ahead and gets a badge. So that's kind of what those are. So parallel steps we spoke about, I think, in good detail. Let's go ahead and looking for notification. Great. So this is the last kind of piece before we wrap it up for the day. So let's go ahead into the tenant, and then so we're going to go here, and what we're going to do is, you know, you already kind of see the notifications here, and we have custom notifications. So I can just, you know, click these buttons, or I can do this business process, add notification. Again, multiple ways of doing the same thing in the UI. Let's go ahead and do this. So we're saying for this specific BP, what I want to do is add a notification to let a manager know that the hire has entered the onboarding step. So let's go ahead and do that. So on entry, basically, here it is. You know, this is what and let's go to this so I could show it in the same screen, or just in a new tab. I'm going to close these. Seems like something, either my connection is slow or something's going on. But you know, all these actions basically are kind of showing up on this entry, right? And I guess like it would be the same thing on exit, right? But I want basically that at the onboarding stage, I want the manager to know that the specific hire has started their onboarding stuff. Trigger on status is basically, you know, at any point if, you know, if the BP has been completed, canceled, corrected, any of this stuff. So multiple ways of getting notifications depending on when you want to get notified or when you want somebody to get notified. You know, for integrations, a lot of the times it's people want to know completed with errors or errored or failed or something like that. But for this higher one, we are going to stick with this onboarding. And you can say if you want a group of people to get it or a specific, what is it, specific person. So here we get to put manager. I will just get this one. Let's see. Okay, that's perfect. And then you could have specific email addresses. Let's say, this manager group has a specific um, email address that you want it to be sent to. But right now, let's go ahead and let's see if somebody's replying to the email message. Maybe you just want to have a default inbox that it goes to. So instead of it responding to like the email going nowhere, you might have it directed back to something else. Let's go ahead and put the subject and actually use the external field. So I want the legal name of the hire and the full legal name. Someone. Okay, take this legal name, and then the body is where it kind of gets interesting, right? Like it's very clunky the way it'll like initially be when you're trying to put it together, but you have the legal name as the subject, and then the body is your new hire, and I am going to add another row to get the legal full name. Full name for your new hire has been assigned onboarding tasks. And so looks clunky, but this is how you get to add it. You could also have, SMS messages sent. I am gonna just do okay at this point. So here's the thing. And then if I want to preview what's going to actually be sent, click OK. And here it is. This is exactly how this email notification will look like. Email subject is legal name. Email body is your new hire. And then, whatever you're seeing in quotations, it's when this is actually being sent out for, in the examples that I've been giving, if it's, Sarah is being hired, here we go. Email subject, it would just say Sarah Nawaz. Email body, your new hire, Sarah Nawaz, has been assigned onboarding tasks. So you can make this as wordy as you want. You can pull in a whole bunch of things, but this is kind of how it will look. And once I click done, this will, when I go to the notifications tab, you will get a whole thing. This one. This is the one that at any point, like I need to change it, I need to disable these, or I no longer want this, I just go ahead, click disable. You can go ahead and get to the same thing here and edit it if you need to edit it. Copy the notification, edit the notification, delete the notification. I think now if I edit it, I should be able to.
Sarah,
Yes, yes.
can we send the emails to the external emails?
Yeah, this is what this is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you'd be able to send it to external emails. You'll be able to, the SMS piece, send the text messages. This one maintains system notifications, is where it's going to specifically to the inbox, but you could have that as well. And then the bottom piece is for email specifically. Let's see. Let me just share. Move this screen over. So we just did that add notification step. You could trigger on specific things. You can say which time zone. So about all of these. And then this is just kind of looking at creating a notification. Any questions on anything we talked about today so far?
No, sir, it's okay. Yes, yeah. We have to do some practice anyway. Mhm.
I feel like today we didn't have as many questions come up, but thank you for like sticking to the topics. I feel like it's easier to get through the material, but yeah, if you have any other questions related to today or just kind of functional use cases in general, or talking about the differences between PeopleSoft, more than happy to discuss that right now.
Sarah, I have one
Yeah.
question with organization creation. Suppose if I created a supervisor called XYZ, and I created a subordinate called X, and one which Y I created as a divide type of organization to X as Y. So in the organization chart, when I see both X and Y subordinates to XYZ. So what is the difference between then X and Y? One is
Okay.
type divide, the other one is called subordinate.
One is called subordinate. What was the other one you said?
Other one, I created another organization called Y as a part of a divide for X. So they'll be parallel. It looks like both are subordinates to XYZ main company.
Yes, yes.
What will be the difference between the divide and anything other than divide?
Sure. So, like it's just another, Workday is just providing another way of doing it. So let's go here. So you see executive management department, right? And then we have like these three other departments. Let's say, oh, sorry. Here we go.
Yeah.
Can you see it now? The tenant? Are you seeing the tenant? Okay, great. So there's, like right now I have this. Let me see 1 second. I'm just looking for my example. Let's see here. Okay. So we have this, right? Okay, so you see this. So let's take human resources and we'll do benefits, we'll do payroll and HR operation. So to answer your question succinctly, or like in very few words, is there's no real like real difference. You could do create. So for human resources, I could do create subordinate, right? I could do reorg, create subordinate, and just put, so this one is benefits. Uh, and just a department and click submit. So that's one way, right? And then
Yeah.
I could, it doesn't really do anything. If I just go ahead do divide over here, right?
Mhm.
And then this one is called payroll. Put this in department. And now I'm gonna have to put where this is located. That's the only real difference because it's not gonna inherit. And you'll see it gets treated the same way because I divided the subordinate and it needs to still go to that superior org. Does that make sense? So creating a subordinate at an upper level does the same
Mhm.
thing as dividing a subordinate.
So there is no difference at all.
No difference.
Yeah, so
But
whatever inherit, it will be inheriting from human resources, or the divide one will inherit all of those characters from benefits.
it'll go ahead and it'll so you saw how location I had to enter. Everything else will be mimicked the same over. Um, and most likely this will inherit from here, but I see what you're saying. It's going to be, it's going to take whatever's in here and then copy that over. It's going to take whatever was dictated on your subordinate and move that over.
Oh,
So
not
it's kind
from
of like
human.
yeah, not from human resources.
Okay.
So
So
yeah,
is there
if you,
anything, Sarah?
sorry, say it again.
So this question, one of my friend who is working in Workday
Mm,
asked me, so I was a
mm.
bit confused.
Yeah, I haven't run across that question, but that seems like a really good question. And
I
actually, well,
give me
give me,
that you.
yeah, let me see one thing. Give me, if you have 2 minutes, just give me 2 minutes. Let me search
Yeah, sure.
something.
I tried to
Um,
search for that, but I couldn't find any answer.
yeah, let's see if we can find something together.
Will there be anything we can get it from community?
Yes, that's where I'm going. This is why
Oh,
it's so nice to have community access. Let's see if
sure, sir.
I can. Oh, they took it away.
Oh,
Give me 1 minute. I think I'll be able to get it.
yeah, sure, sure.
And you know what? Let's learn together. This is why I love community. Let's see. Okay, this is helping. Okay, this doesn't help. Let me look for documentation. Let me see. Documentation here. Let's do something else. Let's start with this one and see. Sometimes it just takes a little longer to get to what you want. Okay, here we go. And this thing is kind of useful, right? Like just like what we were talking about, that there's brainstorms, there's questions, customers ask each other stuff, but then this is kind of this view, this table of contents, these books, and like how I was specifically looking for documentation from Workday. This is how they, I guess they consider it admin guides, where you get to know exactly why they've delivered something. So, okay, Workday enables you to create a new sibling organization as a business process and select which subordinate move. So you get to do divide organization. The new organization inherits roles from the organization's superior organization by default. So I guess that answers your question. It's going to be the superior. So I was wrong. But I guess I was thinking, yeah, that the benefits, let's do this 1 second. So right now we got this inherited, right? Let's do this. So let's see if she comes. Okay. And let's do it again. So it's HR. All right. So this is benefits. The owner was Joy Banks. Now let's see which one she got. I did HR operation. Okay, yep. So I was wrong. So I'm glad I tested it out and looked at community. It is the superior org, which is very interesting. So I'm going to say it a couple of times so I remember, and hopefully you don't say something incorrectly in your interview. It's the superior org. It's going to inherit from the superior org.
Okay.
A very good question. I haven't had that come up. I usually just use create subordinate.
No. So Yeah, only is there any other difference, Sarah?
Yeah, let's see, since we have community. Where did it go? One sec. Oh, here we go. Oh, see, you can override the inherited role assignments, but that's just it doesn't say why specifically.